All right. Hello and welcome, everyone. So, we need to talk about Kullervo and his new augment, as it has radically changed the build that I use on Kullervo. So, for that, let's get started. We are, of course, as usual, going to talk about the shards first, and I do have quite a lot of investment in Kullervo. He is very worth it. First and foremost, the one that absolutely matters not at all, the parkour velocity. I just like this, but you do also have the ability to teleport, so if you don't want to use this, there are very reasonable reasons to not need it or not want it, but just for general movement, I like having a Tau Forged parkour velocity shard. Otherwise, though, in this build, I am running 2 ability strength shards. These don't actually really change the performance much in terms of, like, what levels you're usually going to play, but it is, like, technically helpful, and these have been in here for past builds, which is why they're still in here. They're still helpful, but they were more for past builds than for this build, so you don't really need them. The 2 things that are making much more of a significant damage difference are these 2 Tau purple melee critical damage shards, which are 37% a piece, but those are both doubled because I do have more than 500 energy in this build, so it is a very significant amount of critical damage. This is basically an additional melee crit mod that is going to be just active at all times for me, which can add up quite a bit, especially depending on which melee weapon you are going for. Besides that, though, you'll notice some significant stat differences between the old build and this one. That is because we have kicked out all of the other survivability mods that are not volatile recompense. This is daggers twirl in a ring around Kullervo for 25 seconds, slashing nearby foes and dealing blast damage and status effect before returning to the ring. So what this means is that instead of all of the things that I said were a negative about him in the tier list review for Kullervo that happen at higher levels, those go away, because this makes it so that instead of spamming your 2 over and 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 over, because you'll get all of your overguard taken and need it back right away, this is just allowing you to turn your 2 on, and then it will just continue to give you overguard for its entire duration while inflicting slash and now blast, which are just a bunch of the blast on this is just purely unnecessary words that have been added to this that allow it to, like, DPS on low level missions, which is hysterical. But the main effect here is that you get to press this button 1 time and you get 30 seconds of constantly having your overguard refreshed, constantly being healed. Just incredible stuff. This does want range, of course, because if there is a radius on this, we have built quite a bit of range. I was on max range for quite a while. That was in here instead of the equilibrium. I do think that this equilibrium is more of a flex slot, because I haven't really found that I need the extra energy in pretty much any case, but I do sometimes hang out on the lower end of energy in, like, the 100 to 150 range of my total available 650 capacity. And when that happens, that's a little bit sketchy. So I think for, like, safety and also allowing you to spam more if you really just want to, like, go crazy with his abilities whenever you want, I think equilibrium is a really good choice to be more often topped off on your energy max. But feel free to try out other mods in this slot. If you just want to go max range and go to 280, totally reasonable. Just, if you want an even more strength, if you want to try out blind rage, maybe you swap out your shards for some equilibrium shards. That could probably make that work if you value even more strength than we have here. I think that this slot is pretty open to interpretation. Maybe you just don't want to refresh your 2 almost ever. You could think about throwing narrow-minded in there if you don't care about the range as much. Maybe you, like, mostly only care about teleporting and using recompense, and then you don't care as much about curse and Uko. Those are all very reasonable. I think there's a lot of flex to this build, and you can do a lot of different things, and that is because we kind of just got a bunch of slots back now that we don't need all the Umbral shit, because we are just using this. The Intensify has stayed, because Intensify is just good for all of your abilities, and you don't need it even, I would say, mostly on Storm of Uko, so there's no consideration for Precision Intensify, so Umbral it is when we have space. And then we're on, just good strength stuff, not going crazy. Transient Fortitude, again, could be Blind Rage. If you find that your energy economy is extremely comfortable with Equilibrium, you get some duration back and lose some efficiency this way. I think this is extremely reasonable. And with the starting energy, you're still going to start on 180 with this, which is casting your 2 twice, which is, more than, almost a minute and a half, actually, with this amount of duration that you could do also. So there's there's lots of things to change around, and they're all going to perform very, very well. The interesting and kind of weird things that I didn't expect in this build is that because your 2 is just always on and constantly generating overguard, whenever you get into like decently high levels, there is a little bit of a vulnerability point that you can be killed during on recompense. You will sometimes have a delay in the next dagger giving you the next chunk of overguard. Usually it doesn't happen, but a thing that has been nice for kind of some offense and also a lot of defense is Arcane Truculence. So this is a thing that I kind of never thought was going to be useful, but this is the situation where it comes up. This is when gaining 3,000 or more overguard threshold, release a 30-meter radial attack that applies maximum viral stacks. So this is very helpful because generally speaking, if you're on a melee build for Kullervo, you don't really have room for viral unless you want to subsume Nourish. And as you can see, we have no subsumes on this build because you kind of are always losing something fairly major on Kullervo when you do decide to go with a subsume. But this gives us access to viral on, usually we're using like melee influences and stuff, or like a big heavy attack melee that's usually more towards corrosive damage, and we're not getting those viral stacks. This gives us those viral stacks anyway. And more importantly, the thing that this doesn't say is that it staggers on every single pulse. So you're constantly sending out these pulses. Downsides to Truculence that I do want to talk about, these are, they need line of sight, so that's rough. They do travel a little slowly, so like you are pulsing this out constantly. It's mostly going to protect you in like kind of close-ish range. I'd say it's more effective at about like the 15 to 20 meter range. You're not really getting like a full 30 of all the enemies near you being affected because a lot of them are going to be behind walls or in doorways and so on and so forth. So think of this not so much as like always just being damage. It is more so, it's akin to being able to equip Mesas 2, I would say. I'd say it's more close to that than anything else. And you definitely don't have to run this, but I found it to be very convenient and just nice. We're also on multi-augmented. This is just another good 60% strength, which is helping everything that we're doing. It's getting us to that nice 200% strength, which is notable because it's going to get us to the 100% damage redirection on Collective Curse, which is just allowing you to eliminate groups very, very easily. Now, we all know that Kullervo is cracked out of his mind. So I could show you a good melee weapon like the Thallus, which is a fairly normal melee weapon, but it is like an incarnate and it has all these advantages, and we're going to go over the Thallus in another video. But I decided to do something much more accessible and show off Sun and Moon. Haven't talked about Sun and Moon in ages at this point, but this is just given to you for doing Duviri. And you have to have done that if you have Kullervo. So it doesn't really get more accessible than that. If you have the Warframe, chances are you also have this. Also, this is a quest that's on the fucking main story quest progression. So I hope you have the capability to build such a thing. Obviously, this is quite a lot of mods and stuff in here. This is the usual in terms of a melee influence build, which this weapon is reasonably eligible for. But in general, this weapon is not normally used. It's a bit suboptimal. It also does not have a great heavy attack. Obviously, it is like, a good amount of damage, and it is a ×3. But the 3 individual attacks are actually not great for Kullervo. So this is kind of a middling weapon for him to be able to equip that's kind of just available to everybody that probably has him. We are on Naramon for the combo. Of course, you can always just throw into another weapon, just a dexterity arcane if you have those available. And also in our companion slot, real quick, we are going to like do some stuff. Having Death Cube is like, it's insurance on top of insurance on top of insurance and on top of energy economy on top of this on top of that. Death Cube's incredible. And there's a lot of ways to use him to great effect. But we're just going to show the survivability of just turning your 2 on and letting it rip. So the pulses are, of course, the Truculence, and you're seeing those big stumbles come out. You're also seeing the 2 be able to kill these level 230 Steel Path Butchers and stuff. If they're just around, because 10 viral stacks plus a little bit of slash damage pretty consistently can get you pretty far. I will say with Truculence giving the viral procs, even if you just toss your 4 into here, it is actually a pretty reasonable damage even to these higher level enemies. You can see these like Gunners and Bombards taking kind of significant damage considering how passive this is, and it being able to clear this group pretty reasonably, I would say. Though, of course, you have much, much better ways to take care of them. Of course, this is also building combo, so you can just, take care of pretty much whatever you need to take care of in really short order. So Kullervo is now functionally able to turn on invincibility a la a Revenant adjacent ability. It's not as strong as what Revenant is capable of doing, and it is, I would say, not as safe as something even like, you know, as it does, like even something like invisibility is usually going to be a little more consistent because, like I said, there are moments where you are vulnerable, which is usually not the case with invisibility. It's pretty much never the case with Revenant. And something like Nyx, of course, is going to be more able to just, you know, be in her for, and the bar turns gray and you can't take damage anymore. But what this does offer is your ability to, like, you know, do the Kullervo stuff, whether that's even just like your 3 plus your 4, which is of course going to do hilarious damage and just kill everybody through all of the damage sharing that you can chain enemies together with, or whether you are deciding to use your 1 and like buff your melee weapon to hell and back. Just like, you know, you could do your 3 plus your 1. That's usually going to do just, you know, obscene nonsense. It's much worse with this weapon, which is why I chose it, just to show like how much better it can make things whenever we do the actual test. But yeah, chaining enemies together, locking down zones by throwing out your 4. It's, you know, it's classic Kullervo stuff. Now, like with the easy bake oven of this 2 augment, it is extremely powerful, and it definitely makes me much more likely to play Kullervo whenever I'm going to higher levels where his 2 would otherwise be annoying to use. This is really an augment that removes his 2 being just not enough overguard generation at much higher levels. And great. There's obviously still not really much, if anything, wrong with regular Kullervo without this augment in any kind of regular piece of content, but it certainly is a build improvement. So with that, let's jump into ye olde test and just absolutely murderize everyone. I'm going to give Deathcube back his weapon this time for real, though. All right, away we go to a just... I mean, this mission's not... It's not going to be a problem at all. Like, it's simply not going to be an issue. The other notable thing is that, like, I have been talking about Kullervo as, like, being, like, a melee Warframe. It's not that you have to play him that way, honestly. Like, you can just equip gun, and his 2 will still do a great job of protecting you. It's just that most of his other abilities revolve around making melee better. So that is kind of the natural way that he is tilted. If you were just going to use his 2 for survivability, unless you just love the way he looks in his new deluxe skin, which who could blame you, there's not a huge amount of reason to be him over other incredible options. But, like, you know, liking how Revenant looks is a good enough reason, I suppose. But yeah, Kullervo gives, like, every single relevant thing that you could probably really want. His 2 builds melee combo, his 4 builds melee combo. His 2 building melee combo is much more relevant whenever you can just simply have that be happening all the time. That's quite nice. And of course, like, his 1 is this, like, you know, this red crit monster ability where you can now just, you know, make everything red, which was, as we know, if the numbers are red, that means that the numbers are the best and highest. That's just clearly how that works. I've been told that by various TikTok clips. That's just what that means. We're all familiar with that, of course, being the case. And yeah, I mean, just like zone lockdown, being able to throw out your 4 and have that just, like, you know, just kill all of, like, the chaff enemies, even on steel path that wander into an area usually. Incredible. Like, being, like, you know, pretty good at locking down an area, doing area defense. Like, even if he needs to, like, just stand in one place, for example, like if I needed to stand, like, kind of further away from these enemies, I can just, like, chain everybody up and just use a heavy, and that's going to kill all of the enemies that have been chained together with the guy who's, like, close to me. And that's an effective way to turn your melee damage into ranged damage. It's just good stuff. Forward, back, left, right. You are doing the melee thing while having incredible survivability, and that really allows for you to fuck around more. Which if you're someone who prefers melee combat and you're just like, well, for example, like Sun and Moon, as we talked about, are, like, generally quite a suboptimal pick that kind of everybody has access to. I would say it's, you know, probably the worst of the Duviri weapons overall. Maybe there's a little bit of debate there somewhere. But, like, if you just think they're cool and their unique moveset is sick, first of all, I'd agree with you. Part of the reason I picked it for this video. But, like, Kullervo will make it work. Like, if you have, like, a bad melee weapon and you're like, oh man, I wish this had crit, Kullervo can pretty much figure it out in 95+% of cases. Like, it is you're gonna be hard pressed to find a weapon shitty enough that Kullervo can't kind of fix with his varietal buffs and things. Not saying that they don't exist, because some weapons are fairly unsavable for steel path level content, but you know, usually those weapons have other weapons in their family that you can utilize. Things like Sun and Moon are more of a one and done, where you kind of need to make this work if you want to use this weapon type. But yeah, it's just good stuff. Like, apply numbers to forehead until morale is worse for the enemy. Until the enemy is no longer having a good time, you will continue to slice and or dice them. Perhaps both. Yeah, and like the kill rate, obviously I'm at like 400 right now. We're at 3.5 minutes. That's a little bit, of course, like always, just dependent on like how hard you're wanting to go. Like if you use Collective Curse in kind of unideal environments fairly often, like it can obviously, you know, take you much higher on the here's my KPM. You know, because just setting up an extremely long hallway with 1 million guys that you kill all instantly is very good. That is, of course, always going to be a tile set roll of the dice, but it means that you get to do it sometimes, and whenever you're not able to do that because of the way influence works, you can then rely on that in like the really tight quarters, and it all peanut butters and jellies. Like, it is just a consistent, really powerful and good experience if you are someone who enjoys melee gameplay and wants to be able to swap that up to something else whenever there's an enemy that, say, is immune to melee or like needs you to shoot a weak point or something. There's nothing stopping you on this Warframe just being like, well, it's time for me to use the Kuba Heck on this enemy that needs me to shoot them in the weak spot. I'm not going to suddenly die or lose something or like be stuck and not be able to, like, you know, do the things that make my Warframe baseline good just because I need to do an objective, which is a problem that is, you know, there on some Warframes. But instead, it's just I get to do a different, very good thing at my whim. At my whim, I get to do a different, very good thing. And that's kind of, you know, that's where you want to be. Misery's dead. I don't even know where he was. He was somewhere acquiring a very, very strong electric procs, and now he is dead. I was hoping that he would come out here so I could one-shot him, because that's the kind of thing you're getting out of Kullervo's 99% of the time. Yes, we're at 5 minutes. We're at like 600 kills, which is incredibly normal on Kullervo. Just kind of, you know, in any kind of if you're using a semi-reasonable weapon, even like a budget build, like even like, you know, you have the rumblings of the starting of like, oh, I've got a rank 2 influence, and I've got like, you know, baby's first influence build. Yeah, you're pretty much going to do 100 KPM in Steel Path as Kullervo. Even if like Kullervo's build is budget. Like, I mean, like I've said, you don't need this augment. This augment is an incredible power-up that puts to shame most other augments, honestly. But that is fairly superfluous. Do I think that it's very reasonable to argue that, like, everything I said in the recent tier list for Kullervo is fixed by this? Where I put him at A, having him he had lost his A+, and that you could really easily consider him to be an A+ Warframe with the addition of this augment. Yeah, that's extremely reasonable to say. I would say that is a 100% fair statement. And like, unless they were to, like, you know, nerf this augment for little to no reason, it's probably going to be that on the next tier list. I would have very little to argue against. If were that your argument, I would have very little I could say to argue the opposite. He is just exceedingly powerful and convenient to use, alongside having like some specific gimmicks that are unique to him. And, like, that's not even to mention that, like, you have, like, the tremendous... Obviously, it's a bit skill testing, but, like, just the ability to simply flash step to wherever you need to be. Utilizing that in, like, open worlds, in, like, many tile sets, in capture missions, in this, that, and the other thing. Like, it makes you very capable of going fast on a lot of missions if you want to, like, invest in, like, getting good with it. It is, like, a bit finicky. There's definitely some low ceiling problems that it can still have, but, like... Utilizing it appropriately will also make you a very, very quick mission clearer. And, you know, like, certain melee weapons can, of course, speed up like fast mission times as well. So like, once again, peanut butter and the jelly together at last. And even if you're using, like, you know, a slightly off-brand jelly like Sun and Moon, you can make it work. You can make a perfectly compelling sandwich in this manner. This analogy might be getting away from me. I might also just be hungry. Could be both. But yeah, it's just great. It's just great stuff. Like, do you want to summon blades from the sky, build hella combo, and like utilize that to be able to like heavy attack over and over because you have like inherent combo efficiency on your heavies? Because you're Kullervo, that's just, you know, another thing that you have access to. Like, rebuilding combo is a breeze because no matter what, you can have any group of enemies be turned entirely into combo at their soul core level. It's just phenomenal. It's just really good. Yeah, are we at 1,000 kills yet? We're at 900, we're at 8.5. Honestly, this one's been a little bit lower on the scale of the tests that I've done with him. Usually I've been at about 120 plus with this, although this might be ye olde talking tax on that happening. Always a possibility. I think I've usually in the test been a lot better about placing my 4 down in random locations, which adds up over time, especially at like the normal steel path levels. Yeah, I mean, it does what it says on the tin. Like, every word on this augment is like, it's double the length it needs to be. The word count is immense on this one for its total effectiveness. Here's our next acolyte. Let's make sure we're at max combo. Okay, Mania, I need you to just like spawn in next to me so I can send you to hell. If you could do that for me, that'd be great. Thank you, brother. Oh no, do it. Hold on. Wait. Hold on. Wait. There you go. There's that finickiness with the low ceilings, though. I did mention that. That is still there. Yeah, Mania does not appreciate such a thing. Yeah, being able to turn any weapon into like a multi-million damage red crit monster. Granted, any does mean melee weapon in this case, though melees are quite solid right now in great numbers. There's that low ceiling again. There we go. We can just like, you know, it's hard to get used to because you never know whenever you're going to be like, oh, I'm just going to go like halfway across this room like I did there. Or if you're going to go into like, you know, sometimes you'll clip through stuff, a la Titania similar experience. But yeah, you know, 1064, minute and a half here. Just like, it's about 100 kpm, but man, it is like, this is melee tilted Revenant style survivability in the vast majority of cases. Again, it is weaker than that. There is more vulnerability present here that you're not normally going to experience. But yeah, if you want the melee portion of that in all caps, you're getting it here. Especially if one of the things that you desire is to turn melee damage into ranged damage, as there are a few other ways to do that. But yeah, that's a new Kullervo. Real good stuff. So ends today's video. Thanks so much to all of the patrons for supporting not only this channel, but also the new Soulframe Scholar channel. It is much appreciated as that channel gets started. And thanks very much to our $10 patrons, Atheon, Ith, Albert Drake, Alex Parnham, Arbiter Daydream, Babyhoot, Arcus, Nuven, Automatic, Brutus Salazar, Canalathra, Bob World, Colleen Smith, Dylan Dworsky, Azrain, James Hawthorne, GC4 Science, Josh, Lord Ian, Luzanth, Mike Kiesman, Mikkel, Mitchta, Nerve, Ruby, S267, Sanu, Cezon, Sharp247, The Coupon of Death, Waifu Wars, Waldetto1, Seraphir, and Zero Weebs Plan, and of course all of the $5 and $2 patrons as well. Your support is very much appreciated, and I'll see you in the next one.